If you can just go ahead and share your name and the company that you're working with and your title in the company.
My name is Ellen Kay, and I am the CEO of Kindness Yoga here in Denver.
Awesome. And talk a little bit about your role. Share with us a little bit about your role and what you were doing, and what is it that you do with Kindness?
Yeah, I started with Kindness as a student, and then as a teacher, and then as an administrative assistant, probably without even that good of a title. And like is often the case, I just found myself in the right place at the right time with a company that shared my values in a way that I hadn't even discovered yet. And because of that deep alignment, I started taking on more and more responsibility in the business. And 7 years later, I stepped into the role of CEO. And, you know, in the realm of Kindness Yoga, becoming CEO is special in that I'm the first person to really hold the title of CEO, which means I get to create it. And it gets to be what we choose it to be as a company outside of the realm of what it had been in the past or what it might even be in a more traditional business setting.
Yeah, I think and so we started working together back in October of 2016. Mm-hmm. And at the time you were general manager of Kindness Yoga. Can you talk a little bit about, just from this, because I think this is one of the biggest accomplishments for Kindness, and the work that we did was bringing you into this role as the CEO. Can you talk a little bit about where you were before this transition into CEO, and actually how that in and of that alone has impacted the company?
Yeah, so when I first started working with Chris, I was in the role of general manager, and that role had progressively ballooned, and the owner and founder and his family had moved out of the country. And so I found myself having a say and a finger in every single part of the business, which can be completely amazing and completely overwhelming. And so something that our work with Chris brought forward was the value of structure, the value of delegating. And I really got to see that being in the trenches with every part of a business meant that I had no time, energy, or perspective to evaluate or move the business forward. And so one of the greatest successes and one of the greatest joys for me in stepping into the role of CEO is that I get to empower my team. Other talented people get to step into pieces of the role that I was holding, and I get to have a clear vision of the business. And I think from that space, make better decisions.
And how did your work with myself and Wise Profits impact helping you bring all of that forward? What was holding it back, and how did that transition occur?
Working with Chris and getting the encouragement to clarify our structures, delineate our roles more fully, was at first really hard for me. I liked doing everything. I liked being completely collaborative and fluid. But once I got through the discomfort of doing something new, what I found on the other side was a sense of empowerment and even a greater sense of possibility. I feel a greater potential in myself as a leader and feel more capable of bringing our business to a better level of success. And a lot of that stemmed from working with Chris.
What were some of the other major highlights of accomplishments or successes that we had from our work together?
One of the number one things that working with Chris brought into our organization was a culture around accountability. You know, we're a yoga studio. We're called Kindness. We had a culture around clear communication. We have really strong values, but we didn't have an active role for accountability, which meant we were often ineffective in accomplishing things. And so if nothing else, our work with Chris and the call to accountability, putting systems in place to hold one another accountable, generating that current through our culture, we're a more effective business now than we'd ever been.
What are some of the other areas that our work together impacted your company?
Yeah, another incredible shift that occurred and was generated through our work with Chris was I would just call it goal setting. we started to get, we've always had big goals. We've always had big dreams, but it's easy to flounder. It's easy to get caught up in trying a million different little things to achieve your dreams without a lot of focus. And so through our work with Chris, we got into the rhythm of quarterly strategic meetings, establishing quarterly goals, all rolling up into annual goals. And that put a fine tune on what we prioritized in a way that we hadn't experienced before. Another shift in focus that Chris brought to the table was creating comfortability and focusing on profit. We're a mission-driven business. We're person-centric. We're yoga. We're service. And so there was almost an unconscious discomfort in pointing at profit. And so through our work with Chris, I think we got more powerful and more comfortable speaking about profit, which meant that we had been growing in profitability year over year, but working with Chris, not only did we start to tend to it another way, pay attention to it, measure it more completely, I also believe that our work with him directly influenced our continued profitability year over year and will into the future. So one of the concepts that Chris introduced to our business was the concept of having a mission metric. And that resonated because we're a mission-driven business. And Chris gave us the tools to identify, well, how do you know that you're winning at your mission? And so after a series of conversations and evaluations, we really landed on membership. Membership is phenomenal ongoing revenue that we can count on as a business. But beyond that, when someone becomes a member, it means they're practicing yoga consistently, which means their lives are changing, and that's our mission at play in the world. And so we took it on to get clear how every single member of our organization contributes to the mission metric. And number one was simply starting to measure. Then we started to refine our parameters around how to set goals, how to affect change, how to achieve our goals. And that's something we're still working on and getting more clear about, but it's present in every coaching conversation I have with every member in our organization. Before we started our work with Chris, I felt proud of Kindness Yoga and excited about what we were up to in the world, but not sure how we were going to achieve our goals. And I feel like when you spend years and years and years not confident about achieving your goals, that can start to whittle away at your inspiration, at your motivation, and at your overall satisfaction. And so through working with Chris, what suddenly became attainable were the big dreams. And inside of that was a renewed inspiration and confidence for me. And, you know, I see my role as CEO in part inspirer and motivator. And in order for me to do that effectively, I need to be inspired, I need to be motivated. And so I feel like our work with Chris gave me access to that through putting frameworks, structures, and clear workable steps in place to start achieving goals. Something I really appreciated about working with Chris was the time that he took up front to get to know each individual person in the managerial team. And so I felt like right away Chris was interested in strengths, weaknesses, personal goals, personal desires, and he took the time, and that was really enjoyable. You know, I have to say, of all of the opportunities to drop in with Chris, and we did a lot of work remotely, which is fantastic, the opportunity to work with him in person was my absolute favorite. I'm a people person, and so a year's worth of work accumulating into an in-person quarterly strategic meeting was the most fun, the most inspiring, and I think the most impactful. The thing that I appreciate so much about Chris is that he's at risk of sounding woo-woo, but I am in the yoga industry, so I'll go there. He's a really fabulous balance of masculine and feminine. And being a female leader in a female-dominated industry, I appreciated getting that balanced approach. So Chris could meet me on an emotional level and challenge me to be more quote-unquote businessy at the same time. And I think if that balance of masculine, feminine, hard and soft hadn't been there, I'm not sure that I would have benefited as much from the coaching. What I want anyone to know who is pursuing business coaching with Chris Wise, or honestly with anyone, It's to not worry about whether or not your coach has all the answers or knows your industry perfectly or even gets it right every time. Just having somebody who's taking a stand for your business being better, someone who's taking a stand for you stepping into your power, that's enough. That's the jumping off point. There are things that we're up to in our business now that were generated by Chris, even if they're a slight variation on the theme. And it's clear to me that part of why we got there was from our work together. So I'd say if you're considering working with Chris, go for it. It doesn't matter if it's the perfect fit, because any kind of energy that he gives you is going to expand you in your business.